Really nice.
There you go, Jennifer. It's working.
All right, let's do one real quick. I want to make sure that the video works. It's moving for you guys, right?
Yep.
Very much.
Yes, we're getting it.
And thank you for the panel being on. It was at least nice to see some faces.
Right. Yeah, the video's working, Jennifer.
Here I'm
I don't
talking.
need to understand.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I added another one. Let's just make sure that one works too. Cannot go wrong with Shawshank Redemption with attorneys. Hear that?
Yep,
Yeah.
audio and video.
All right, perfect.
Whoop, whoop.
Okay for me. And I'm so excited about this microphone. Thank you so much, Patty.
Cool.
Telling me about it.
Dan bought one too, if I'm not mistaken, Patty. You
Hey, I should get commission, you guys.
created a wave.
Nice.
Patty, I'm wondering if you're getting a commission from Yeti Blue.
No, that's what I just think I should. Like, if I got two of you out of here, that's pretty good.
Here's the deal. It's
Awesome.
not expensive either, so you don't get a whole lot of money.
No, and that was, because I probably kept putting it off because I didn't want to spend the mega bucks. And then when I saw, what was it, 30, 50 bucks, something like that, I was like, oh my gosh.
Maybe maybe 100. I don't think it was 100. It was not.
Well,
But I don't remember.
I think it's a pyramid scheme. If you got in on the ground floor, you would have been rich by now.
Right.
Goodness, I just need to get my aura. Whew. That was a fun morning to realize I didn't have my talk.
Oh my gosh. You found it?
Well, I had to recreate it quite a bit. Yes.
Oh, good.
So do you see where where it says Meadows Behavioral Health and the water and stuff? Is there a black box right in front of that, or do you see it all?
Black box.
No, there's a black background to the rest of the screen, but your slide itself doesn't have a black box.
Okay, all right. Because the last time I talked, the pictures of everybody, the gallery was showing up on my talk for some weird.
Oh no.
Right.
Good to go.
So how's it been going today?
It's been
So
going
far,
great.
so
Yeah.
nobody's got knocked offline yet.
And mostly still the same. We've got lawyers, assistants, folks, and a couple of bar members.
Right. We have FLA participants, some board members, some outside friends and supporters in the legal community, members of did we say the bar and the board of bar examiners? So we've got a great, and members of our board of directors. So we've got a good cross section.
Good. So I've got the volume kind of turned up. Is that okay? Does it need to be lower? Because they also said it's a very sensitive mic. I'm not booming or anything, am I?
No, but I would turn it up a little, to be honest.
Okay. All right. I turned it up.
Yeah, Jennifer is at a little higher level than you are, for example.
Okay. All right. Let me move it a little closer as well. All right.
Yeah, that's good.
Patty, on the back, it's got that gain knob. They told me to keep the gain low. Do you have your gain low on the very back of the knob?
Yes.
Okay. They said that can be annoying. Why do I look so yellow? I'm not jaundice, I promise.
Okay, well, let's see here. We're at 3 o'clock, so why don't I, Jennifer, do you want to take your slide down for a second and put it back up when we begin the presentation?
Yes, that means I stop sharing, right? There we go.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, listen, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome back, everybody. We are now entering the last presentation of the day, and we're very excited to have Jennifer Angier with us. Jennifer has more than 3 decades of clinical and operations experience in the behavioral healthcare field and currently serves as Vice President at Meadows Behavioral Healthcare. Among other leadership positions that Jennifer has held, she has been Group CEO for Talbot Recovery Campus and CEO for Black Bear Lodge in Georgia. A nationally recognized expert on addiction treatment techniques, she regularly speaks at national conferences to paraprofessional groups and in employee assistance programs, healthcare, and collegiate programs. Jennifer earned her bachelor's degree from Georgia State University, graduating summa cum laude, before going on to complete a master's in organizational leadership at Mercer University, graduating with highest honors there as well. Jennifer comes to us today from Arizona, and we are so pleased to have you here with us. Welcome, Jennifer. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I cannot tell you guys how excited I am to be back with lawyers again. All right, let me get my slideshow up. So truly my heart, soul, my work is working with impaired professionals, and my favorite, and I'm honest about this with doctors, pilots, with everybody, my favorite are attorneys. You guys capture my heart. You make me laugh. You're like a bunch of raccoons when you show up in treatment at the same time, right? Like you're so mischievous, so charming after having gotten caught being mischievous. I always say slick as otter snot. Oh my God, I love attorneys. And what I love so much about attorneys is how you care for each other, how dedicated you are to each other when you are, when you're hurting. And especially that, of course, is lawyers assistance programs. And when an attorney gets this thing, when an attorney finds their way through this movement of recovery that we're going to talk about today, Father Martin said it best. He said, if you have eyes, you can see it. If you have ears, you can hear it. And if your soul has fingers, you can touch it. And that's what it's like for me to be in the presence of attorneys. And when I get to be at lawyers assistance conferences, and there's just tons of you, it refreshes me. And so I'm grateful we're able to do this online. It was incredibly thoughtful for you guys to do it this way. I know we're back in another wave, and I know Florida's being hit really hard. And so my best to all of you and your families, and just stay safe and care for each other as we start to deal with, I think, some of the disappointment's not quite the right word, but as we sort of came out of this and now we're back in it again, I think it's going to affect people's mental health in a very significant way. So thank you for caring for each other. So I have a couple of questions. I want to make sure you guys can hear me okay. My volume is all right. Everybody, we're good? By a thumbs up, maybe Patty, I can see your face.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, perfect.
Sounding good.
All right. So what we're going to talk about today is, in some ways, I hope, a really deep kind of refresher for you to be able to go back, those of you that are in recovery, to when you first stepped across this threshold into what I call grace, into the opportunity to get sober, and then to be able to do almost like time travel, to be able to go back and see yourself getting sober, and how recovery had its way with you, and how it started to move your life and change you. And then that person was changed, and then that person was changed, and how recovery just is like a movement along a timeline spiritually, and we just go deeper and deeper and deeper into our work. I hope that's something that you can access in this. I also, one of the things that I hope that we can touch on is, in real time, where am I in my recovery, and how much am I attending to the demands that my spirituality bring to me? And by demands, I mean, am I telling the truth? Have I slipped into some old behaviors that could possibly be subtly having its way with me, just as grace does? And I also want to talk about something that I don't think we talk about enough. And that's, we often will talk about ourselves from when we were using with so much sorrow, and anger is not quite the right word, but with emphasis on, I was so sick, I was such a piece of crap. Like the emphasis and the intensity about it. And what I think we forget to do is talk about the fact that that person saved our lives, that that person, as distraught as you were, as blind as you were, as impaired as you were, as dishonest as you had become, that is the very person that everything is built on. I also want to speak a little to the work that you're doing now, and what it means to be ready, to be on the ready to help somebody who's suffering, and how hard that is on our psyche sometimes, how rewarding it is. I remember one time working with a patient, sitting with them and knowing that they'd been drinking and confronting that, and they just looking me dead in the eye and saying, I'm not drinking, that is not happening. Just every angle that I could to try to reach them, to let them know they're safe and it's okay, let's just get this under control. But they wouldn't give me the truth. They wouldn't give themselves the opportunity, and they couldn't. And they went home and they killed themselves. And I remember that night saying, that's it. I will not be surprised by this disease, not one more time. I'm so tired of being surprised by this disease. And then, of course, within a week, I was surprised again. And I've continued to be surprised by the devastation of this disease. The numbers that just came out, I don't even know how accurate they are. But since COVID, for just the year of COVID, not including January, which is one of the worst months in COVID, we're up to 95,000, I believe, for overdose deaths, and over 100,000 for alcoholism. And those are the numbers that say on the death certificate. As we know, those numbers aren't ever accurate. So the work that we do is devastating. But at the same time, as I'm continue to be surprised by this disease, I also am surprised by grace. I'm surprised by the beauty of this work, by the difference that we get to make, by how meaningful it is, and how one little turn changes the course of so many people's lives. And so I want to thank you for that, for how you are doing that, for how you are showing up for each other for that, and how you, I hope how you are caring for yourself because of this work. Because the truth is this is our little corner of the world that we have the opportunity to make a huge difference. And so we are going to dive a little bit into the disease. I want to do a little bit of a refresher of what we know, and maybe hopefully come from a different angle to help give it for those of you that are new to this conversation. But really, is any of us new to it? We all love somebody that we've lost from this disease. We all love somebody. We've all sat at the kitchen table and said, what is wrong with them? Why do they keep doing this? We've all sat maybe in our robe, right, as a judge, and said, I don't understand, right? I can't give you another chance, right? We've all been puzzled. But I want to talk about, for those of us from a different angle, a little bit of understanding of how the disease shows up. And I get the privilege of talking with one of our senior fellows. I work for the Meadows, and one of our senior fellows is Dr. Kevin McCauley. And if you haven't had the opportunity to see Dr. McCauley's movie that's shown in just about every treatment center called Pleasure Unwoven, please, please, please get that movie. And he will send you a link to it for free. He also has another one called Memo to Self, which is the conversation about how we stay sober, mirroring what professional programs do. So those of us that, as Talbot used to call them, real people, that aren't professionals, not sure where they came up with that term, but that was always the term. How do they stay sober and follow the same guidelines that you are asked to follow as a recovering attorney? And when I get to talk with Dr. McCauley, which is often, one of the things that he talks about is, he says, I want to take the miracle out of recovery. I want to make it accessible and available. I want everyone to be able to have the opportunities that our pilots have, that our lawyers have, that our doctors have. And then when I get to stand up and talk after him, I talk about miracle. I talk about magic in a way that I want to dispel the use of that expectation when it comes to recovery, because magic is still this form of control. There's still a sleight of hand. There's still And I know we use that word of how magical things are, and I think that's okay. I don't want to get rigid about the term, but I do around the difference between what happens in recovery. What is it that Father Martin's talking about, where if your soul has fingers, you can touch it? What is the miracle of recovery? Because the miracle for us is all of this that I say up here on the PowerPoint. It is the experience of what has happened to us, of who we've become, of who we always were, and of how we come together. I'm just sitting here thinking of the last Lawyers Assistance Program. We were all around a campfire, how we come together again, and the love we experience, the love we give, and what becomes from our darkest days. Because as Bill Wilson said, in God's economy, nothing is wasted. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and how you are set up to be the very people to do the work that you're asked to do, right? To stand up for your clients, for each other, because you have gone to these hidden places inside of you, not just because of your education, but when you couple those two things together, when you have the experience that you have as an attorney, you can speak to another attorney differently than any of us can. And also, what I have seen over all of my years of recovery, the most influential part of an intervention for a patient comes from an attorney. A doctor can hand a patient lab work where their levels are all out of whack, and they still don't take that. But when an attorney says, if you do these things, the chances of your outcome in court are going to be very different. The attorney saying to the family, you have to stop enabling. I insist that this happens now. Those kind of interventions are the most powerful. When I know there's a good attorney behind a patient walking in the door, I know our patients have a better chance. So that level of leadership and how you lead people through a very dark time is simply because you've done the work in a lot of ways yourselves. So I want to talk about three things as we talk a little bit about the disease. And so I am going to dive a little bit into the problem, but hopefully I'm going to do it from a different angle, because I think we all understand progression. We've all understand that if I was to pick up a drink today, I've been sober for 34 years. July 6, 1987 is my sobriety date. If I was to pick up a drink today, we all know that it would be like I hadn't stopped this whole time, and it was worse. And I think that progression gets a lot of press when it comes to this disease, and most people buy into that and understand what it means. I think we spend a lot of time talking about progression when it has to do with recovery around the threat of relapse. But my hope is that as we finish this talk, you will see that your disease is progressing even without a drink, and it shows up even without a drink. The way that I can explain that is I don't need to remember my last drink to remember that I'm an alcoholic. I don't need to remember how I behaved as a drunk person for my alcoholism to be real to me today. I just need to stop treating my alcoholism for a couple of days. And I cannot express to you how sick I get like that, right? That when I stop treating my disease, it shows up. It is way more sophisticated than it's ever been in the stories that it tells me. And the stories are described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as the alcoholic mind. In the chapter More About Alcoholism, again, if you're new to recovery, new to the principles of recovery as it's known in the 12 steps, I strongly beg of you to read the chapter More About Alcoholism. And if you've been sober for 20 years, I ask you to do it again too, because every time I read it, I'm amazed at what a miracle this program is. I can't believe how much they knew before they knew it, right? What we know today, as far as the science of this disease, it's like they had a whisper of it in their ear, and they talk about it in More About Alcoholism in a beautiful way. Great chapter. And the stories that I use that term to describe what a lot of people would call denial. I have yet to use the term denial in my entire career and find it to be helpful. If I say to a patient, like if I was to say to John, I'm so glad you're here for this day today. You have so much denial about about alcoholism, about how it shows up. Even though John really cares for me, he would not be happy with me. He would think, you got to step back a little bit. Like, why are you talking to me? It is not an effective tool. I've never had somebody go, oh my God, denial. That is so helpful. I get it now, right? But when I describe the experience of stories, everyone in the room's head is shaking up and down. They understand what that means. So I want to talk about the loss that we experience as a result of progression and as a result of stories. And the way that I like to describe it is, let's say that every single thing about me, everything about who I am as Jennifer, is piled up on this desk that I'm sitting on, right? Everything from myself at a cellular level, to my liver, to my sense of humor, to my cowboy boots, which I am like never without a pair of cowboy boots, right? Every single thing about me, it's all piled up on this table. This is me, right? The way that the disease of addiction works when somebody is actively using is because of the defining symptom of alcoholism or drug addiction, which is inability to stop using despite negative consequences. The way that plays out is I have to pick something off this table and I have to hand it to you. And every time I use, I go deeper into the pile. And where before in the beginning, maybe in early stage alcoholism or drug addiction, I was up here. But as I continue to use, I get more and more into the core of who I am, and I hand it over. To the point where I start to chip away. You can't see this desk, but at the veneer on the desk, I take the drawers and I throw them out, and it's just a pile of wood on the floor. It's unrecognizable to who I actually was. I don't even look like myself anymore. And that's what it's like to experience progression. As I continue to live in this disease, I give up more and more pieces of me. I just hand them over. But that's not the worst part. Because worse than that, when you suffer from the disease of addiction, every time you pick something off this table and you hand it over, you say, here, take this. I don't need it. You see, we have to do that because the disease of addiction, it lives in the most primitive part of our brain. It tells us without this drug, I cannot survive. And that is not just I need this because I'm in withdrawal. It literally it has hijacked the survival instincts of the brain. You can actually see that on imaging studies. You can see how the brain has shifted in its function when it lives in the brain of an alcoholic, how that part of us does. An example of that would be with 34 years of recovery. All right. If you put my drug of choice, cocaine, in this tiny little dish, which by the way, that's not enough cocaine, but let's just say you put some cocaine in this dish, 34 years of recovery, you're watching activity in my brain. You can see how my brain responds. Don't get me to use the cocaine, just get me to want to use the cocaine, which means just put it in this little bowl. That's how powerful cocaine is to my brain. You will see my old brain light up red hot and my new brain will go completely dark. That's a very important thing to understand. With 34 years of recovery, I do not have access in the part of my brain that reminds me why I don't use. I do not have access to the part of my brain that says, please don't use, Jennifer, you've destroyed the family. So therefore, I don't have access to you. I don't have access to the truth about my relationship with alcohol and drugs. It goes completely dark. Because you see, what the old brain wants, the old brain gets. That's how we are wired as human beings. And so the disease has hijacked that part of the brain. So one area of the brain that's impacted is the orbital frontal cortex. And what happens when the disease of addiction is in full play, now this is not impairment, this is just having the disease. I can see myself in the future with cocaine and I am okay. That's how it shows up. That's how my brain reads the information. The problem with the alcoholic and the reason why we see so many relapses and the problem with the drug addict is because I overvalue future drug-related rewards and I overestimate the probability that they will work out as I intend them to. And this is not an issue of character. This is the disease of addiction. And I undervalue the negative consequences of using drugs, and I underestimate the probability that good things will occur or that negative consequences will not occur. So basically, I get the math wrong. Everything is flipped in my brain. Another area of the brain that's compromised is the anterior cingulate cortex. and I cannot observe myself through your eyes. So I miss the cues where you say, you tell me, or I see you, or I get the feedback. That's what the anterior cingulate cortex does. I don't get the feedback that says something is wrong. And the issue and how this shows up for the alcoholic and the addict is impulsivity and perseverance. So I lose the ability to respond to errors in the past. I lose a crucial behavior guidance system. It's just gone. I'm unable to respond to errors in the past with regard to reward and punishment, and I am creating stories that guide me further away from the truth. I become the stories. Here, take this. I don't need it. I can't need it. If it's compromising my using, it doesn't mean nearly what my using means. So I just hand it over. And that's not even the worst part. Because worse than that, worse than these issues, as I hop around and show you these, is every time I pick something off this table and I hand it to you, I say, here, take this. I don't need it. And then I have to live without that thing. And I go through life without it. So I'm going to give you a very provocative example of that, but it gets to the heart of it very quickly. When I got sober, I wanted to be sober. And I was in treatment, and I had that experience of grace where I could see that something was wrong. But I didn't know all what was wrong yet because of the orbital frontal cortex, because of the anterior cingulate cortex. I didn't have all the information, but I knew something was wrong. And so I was sitting in group, and I said to the group, the therapist said, tell us why now? Why are you here now? And I said, well, I got here on July 6th. On July 8th, my drug dealer was going to turn me out. I was going to have to start doing tricks. I was going to have to start prostituting myself. He had men lined up, and that's how I was going to have to pay for my cocaine. And my therapist stopped me and said, wait a minute, I'm confused. You actually are a prostitute. You're just not a very well paid one. And the truth of that hit me so hard. I was in a mixed group. I felt dirty. I felt filthy. And he was right. You see, I had been prostituting myself for drugs since I was 16 years old. That's how I paid for cocaine. I didn't have that kind of money. But I didn't see it as prostitution. I didn't see it the true way that it was. I was getting your cocaine from you. I was playing a game on you. I was manipulating you. I was better than you. It was all a game. And so I gave away something so precious as that intimate interaction with people at an age probably around 14. So what's worse? That I was prostituting myself from age 14 until almost 19? Or that I didn't even know it? See, if you think about taking something off this table and handing it away and saying, here, take this, I don't want it. And then I had to live without it. I lived without that innocence. I lived without that beauty. And worse than all of that, that became normal. That became who I was. I became that story. So I didn't even know to say I was prostituting myself. And if you think about all the turns that happened in my life, do you think I got to hang out with the cheerleaders and talk about how cute the quarterback was? Do you think I actually went out with the quarterback? Do you think that I believed myself to deserve the love of a man? Do you think I felt in any way, shape, or form like a 16-year-old girl? I became the story. I gave it away. That's one example. See, if you would have asked me, if my therapist would have said to me, write down the top 10 reasons for you to get sober, the top 10 consequences of your using, I would have written those down because I wanted to be sober. But I wouldn't have written down any of the top 10 reasons because I'd given them away so hardcore. I had given them away. I didn't even know I'd given them away. It was about 4 years sober when I was tested and realized that I literally had a 7th grade education. See, what I thought was wrong was I was stupid. I was ignorant. I couldn't learn like you. I was unteachable. Think about when that started, right around age 12. when I stopped going to class because I was going out back to smoke weed. I didn't notice that I was giving up the most important thing that could ever guide me as an adult, which was what was happening between the front door of the school and the back door of the school. I just ran right through to go to the back door so I could get high. So I was missing everything that was happening in between. And I was missing how it would create me as a human being, what it would feel like to learn how to do geometry, what it would feel like to read a book and understand what I got from it, what to learn from history. All of that was not in my world. So do you see these consequences that we experience? They aren't just car accidents and loss of my ability to practice law or my medical license. They come in the fact that I don't even know who I am anymore, that I'm completely lost to the pursuit of drugs and alcohol and what I believe to be true about me. So backing up again to looking at progression, stories, and loss. As I start to hand these things over, I lose who I am. I lose myself. And that's who shows up in treatment. So when I walk in the door of treatment, I may want to stop using. I may say I want to quit. But the problem is I have no idea how bad it's gotten. I have no idea what's coming my way. And so the first work of grace is I can see the truth. And that's what happened to me on July 6, 1987. All of a sudden, the truth started coming to me as like a tsunami. I was able to understand slowly, fast, in all different ways what was wrong. And I've heard it said that grace is the moment that God freezes the lie. All of a sudden, my brain would stay on and I could see the truth. But the beauty of it is, the absolute beauty of grace, of truth, is that I can start to see who the enemy is and I have a chance at getting sober. I'm not under the influence of what the big book talks about, which is those strange mental blank spots where I can't see the truth anymore, where there's in that chapter more about alcoholism, there's the story of Jim and there's the story of Fred. They're great little stories, just tiny little quick stories where they talk about, I wanted to be sober and next thing you know, I'm drunk, right? I went about drinking as carelessly as if the drinks were ginger ale. Why does that happen? How does that happen to the alcoholic? Well, because we don't have access to the truth when our brain takes over like that. And Dr. McCauley describes in a beautiful way how the brain is impaired by the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction, not by just the drug, but by the actual disease, and how we can't read cues and how we lose our ability to see the truth when we're reaching for that drink. So as the big book says, I think so insightfully, they say that it is the thinking that precedes the drink that we think is the root of our troubles. So you see, my problem is not alcohol. My problem is the way I think. My problem is that I can't remember. My problem is my orbital frontal cortex, my anterior cingulate cortex. And what recovery brings me is a group of anterior cingulate cortexes outside of myself, in a group of attorneys that I can call and that can help me say, let me remind you who you are. Let me remind you what we told you. So I have to have it outside of myself. So one of the things that happens in early recovery, so now we're going to assume that as moving forward for the rest of this talk, where I want you to kind of go to that place of your sobriety date and what started to happen for you as you were sitting in treatment or as the truth started to show up in your life. And remember the flood of how everything seemed to be coming at once. Why? That's because a miracle has happened of some sort and your brain is now on and you can actually see what's happened. But this is not a pretty time. This is a horrible time. This is why our attorneys complete suicide when they are on their way to treatment or a couple of days into treatment. This is why we lose so many beautiful souls in early recovery, because the truth, they don't have the ego strength. They haven't created the infrastructure to handle all this information. And as a matter of fact, the truth just confirms the need for the next drink, right? The truth is just another reason to drink. Who does this? Who steals money from a trust of a valued, loved client? Who stops breastfeeding so they can start to drink again? Who drives their children drunk? over and over. Who shows up in court drunk? And so as that information starts to come, we are also left with something that we don't know how to handle it. And this is why treatment serves such an important purpose in early recovery, because we hold that person, we steady them, we steel them, right? So as the information starts coming, we try to hold them still and say, it's okay, we got you. Like, we got you. You're going to understand this. This is going to be an important part of your recovery. But all they can see is their world is crumbled around them. It's like almost like from there's there's a movie, and I'm all of a sudden blanking on the movie, but the king has fallen asleep. He's under a spell. There's a little man whispering in his ear, and it's put him to sleep. And then all around him, his son has died at war. His kingdom has fallen. And it's Lord of the Rings. And he wakes up. And when he wakes up, he doesn't wake up in fairy tale land. He doesn't wake up like, oh my God, thank God I'm awake. Everything's beautiful. He wakes up and his son has died. His kingdom has fallen apart. And there is nothing but rubble. And that's what it's like to wake up in treatment. And as we wake up, this enormous just wave of grief starts to happen for the truth. And we have to experience this in order to get to the next part of recovery. We have to be able to tell the truth about our relationship with alcohol and drugs and what's really happened. There's a lot of reasons for why we need to know that, but the most important reason is just because it's the truth. That actually occurred. And whether or not I was all on board for it, whether or not I could even understand it, it still is the reality. And so that's the life I have to build around, is what I'm capable of when I'm under the influence of my disease, not alcohol, but my disease. I'm capable of a lot of crazy crap when I'm drunk, but that's not all of it, right? Because if that was my only problem, I would just stop drinking. And so early recovery is, it's often said that the most important step when it comes to sobriety is the first step. We admitted we are powerless over alcohol in our lives and become unmanageable. Now I am going to talk about the 12 steps, and I want you to think of them as a formula, right? A formula that works. It's almost mathematical. If you work these steps in order, you will be a different person. You will have insight that you didn't have before. And that's what's required of recovery in one form or another, whether it's AA or through religion or through other levels of insight. But we do have to work some sort of formula to clear away the debris. The best way that I can describe my sobriety date is, it's like on July 6, 1987, this room that I'm in right now, it's my office, right? It's almost like someone opened the door to my office and just kicked me in. That's my sobriety date, right? And I landed in this room. But in this room, it's almost like a wormhole, right? In this room is truth. Everything in this room is true. Everything in this room is influenced by grace. And when I land here, you're all here. You're all sitting here. Some of you have been here for months. Some of you have been here for years, but you're here. And here's the important part. You've been influenced by grace the whole time you've been here. But I come in, I get kicked in. We all get kicked in with this barrier, this block of all these stories that I believe to be true. I'm in the room. I have access to truth, but I can't see it fully because I'm still behind all of these stories. So the work of recovery is to make a home for grace. The work of recovery is to move everything out of the way so that I can see and experience truth. And the reason why step one is said to be the most important step is because within it lies the truth about our relationship with alcohol and drugs. But I don't believe that step one is the most important step. I believe step two is. Step two says that came to believe that a power greater than ourself could restore us to sanity. Now, we've all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I think that's a great definition for a lot of things, like why I always buy random shit, right? But when it comes to the disease of addiction, insanity is not that definition. What they were talking about was the alcoholic mind, the inability to see the truth. They were talking about that and that and that and that. That's what they were talking about. They were saying What we now know, when we look at that imaging study, my new brain goes dark. I need something higher than my brain. Absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. I cannot call back into my mind again what happened. I get the math wrong. I cannot see my children's eyes. I miss the cues. So I have to depend on something higher than me. And this is where a lot of people hit a barrier when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. They think that step 2 is where they have to figure out who God is. And step 2 has nothing to do with figuring out who God is. Step 2 is about taking the gift of grace and telling the truth through step 1. And the fact that I can do it is miraculous, because I couldn't do it before, and now I can. And so step 2 is not about, figuring out and taking a bunch of resumes and CVs and interviewing a bunch of gods. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with telling the truth. And I can see it today through something. There's a part of our brain called the called the corpus callosum. It ties the right and left hemisphere of our brain together. Step 2 is like a spiritual corpus callosum, right? It ties the old and new brain together. It helps me to see the truth. And I don't know where it came from, and I can't explain why it happened. And that's the miracle to me. But I do know I have it, and I have to do something with it. And so I have to tell the truth about my relationship with alcohol and drugs. And I need your help to weed through it. When I will pick a God, or when I will understand God, that's later in the formula. Right now, the work is to tell the truth about what's happened. And from that truth comes an enormous amount of grief. Grief now that I can see that I lost my innocence. Grief now that I can see what I gave up and what I compromised. And then I'll never get it back. That I don't get to erase that truth. And there's also a subtle grief too, and it's not so subtle sometimes, that I don't get to use anymore. That I don't get to feel the relief that alcohol and drugs had brought me in the past. Because see, when I use drugs, when an alcoholic drinks, everything in us can breathe. I used to say, it's almost like my skin didn't fit. And then when I used, I could just freaking breathe. And it stopped working and I didn't know it. And so I have to grieve that even if I was to pick back up again, even if I was to choose to use now after I'm sober, that I will never get the effect that I had before, that was gone 3 years before I got sober. And I'm pissed and I'm angry that nobody told me. And I'm pissed and I'm angry that I walked this earth just being pimped out by the disease of addiction. And that's a part of the process. And again, in a treatment center, in a setting of safety, this is how we walk through this. So we do have to experience this grief. And then something is born in that, right? Some little thing called hope, which is the principle behind step 2. But this is a really interesting principle, right? When I got sober, I believed very much in hope. And I was all of a sudden able to see that you had something I wanted. When I met my sponsor, her name was Darlene, and she smiled at me. That's the very first thing she did. And y'all, she had the most beautiful smile I have ever seen. I truly would have gone to the ends of the earth to have what that woman had. I wanted to be clean. I wanted what she had. I hoped for it, which is a really good thing because she was the meanest human being on the planet. That woman, she did not play, right? Like she said to me, I mean, like the very first thing she said to me was, if I ask you to stand on your head and spit quarters out of your butt on Peachtree Street, I'm going to need you to do it. Right. And I said, all right, do you have change for $1? I didn't know what else to say. Right. Like, I was like, okay, I'll do it. Right. I wanted what she had. I hoped I could have it. And so every time she told me to do some stupid, ridiculous thing, like go to a meeting when I really had issues with my parents, right? Or when she said, I want you to read step 3 in the big book, when I was trying to explain to her that my roommates were total assholes, she would give me these dumb things to do. I did them because I thought, all right, if that's what made you smile like that, I'll do it, right? I hoped. And hope drove me down the road in doing different things that changed me. And so hope throughout my whole sobriety has been really important. But I was reading this book by Pema Chodron. I think I always say her name wrong, so forgive me. But it's called When Things Fall Apart. And it was at a particularly dark time in my sobriety. It was so lovely. It was, oh my God, it was just like so important to me. And I was halfway through it, or maybe a page into it, I don't know. And she said, and I'm really super paraphrasing, but what she said was, hope is bad. And I was like, well, dang it, I liked this book. And now I can't read it anymore because I like hope. Hope is like my fuel. But I kept reading. And what she said was, hope robs us of the present moment. When we hope to be somebody else, when we hope to see ourselves down the road, what we're really saying is the person I am right now is not enough. What she said is, we try to jump over ourselves to get to a better us. And she said, you cannot jump over yourself to get to a better you. Who you are right now is who you have to know. In early sobriety, that did not happen, right? I lived within hope, and I think that's okay. But as we get sober, as we stay sober, we have to start finding ourselves exactly where we are and see the courage it takes to be in that space. I was in I don't remember if it was a lawyer's assistants conference or not. No, it was not. It was an industry conference. And we had AA meetings in the morning, like we do at our lawyer's assistants conferences. And there was a man in the meeting who I knew. I'd studied his work. He was brilliant, and he had 3 PhDs. He was highly sought after in our industry, very wealthy, and because he'd written a bunch of books, and you get the point. He was the man. And we're all talking in the meeting, and he told this story about how when he got sober, he had nothing. He had no education, and he was in a horrible, bitter, ugly, awful, nasty divorce. And he had 2 sons, and all he wanted was to be able to see his sons, but his wife would not allow it, and the courts wouldn't either. And so the only thing he could do to love his children was to pay child support. But he was newly sober and he had nothing. So he had to work 3 jobs. And one of those jobs was delivering pizza. And the requirement of being an employee at this company and delivering their pizza was you had to dress in a chicken suit. And so he had to dress in a chicken suit and deliver pizza. Well, his wife found out that that's what he was doing. And he was doing it to pay child support, but to her, this was awesome, right? So she held a party. She got all of their friends and their children and their children's friends. And she ordered a pizza. So he would have to show up and be humiliated in his chicken suit. And he told the story of how when he rung the bell and everybody answered, and there he stood in a chicken suit, how he felt like such a failure. And then he stopped in real time while he was sitting in that room with all of us and said, my God, I was at my best back then. See, he was wearing a chicken suit so he could pay for his kids' child support. He had nothing, and he just wanted to be able to love them. And in early sobriety, we don't see it at the time because we're so driven by how bad things are. But we all wore a chicken suit, and that person needs a little attention from us today. We need to go back and say, thank you. You saved my life. And so hope in some ways blinds us to all that experience, but it's a key important part of recovery, because ultimately what comes to us is who I am is way more than what I've lost. And that's what we need each other for, is to remind each other of what it means to be a person, a human, someone that has suffered, someone that has been under the influence of something, and in the meantime has seen some very dark, ugly things. And we are that person. And so hope and grief start to have their way with us in a very real way. And that takes us into step 3, which I think is what sends most attorneys scurrying out the door faster than any other step, right? Because this is the step that said, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. This is the step that they believe is the cult part of the step. And I remember even saying to that sponsor of mine, I am not going to go to the airport and start selling like sunflowers and shit. I'm not joining a cult. Right. And she said, you know what? There's really not a lot of cults that want you. So you're safe. Okay. You're not exactly being recruited for cults right now. Step 3 is not about picking a God. Again, step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. The important part of step 3 for me, my work in step 3, is how do I demonstrate my decision? Where's my chicken soup? That's step 3. That I do things I don't even know why I'm doing them. Again, another quote from Father Martin is he said, it's the things that we're doing that we don't know that we're doing that make us different. Right? And that's step 3. Step 3 is I'll do whatever. It's the, do you have change for $1? And there's this tiny little part that says, I don't know how to do this, but something inside of me does. So again, in the formula of the steps, it's helpful when you're working with someone that gets really freaked out about step 3 to ask them to put aside the idea that this is where they have to figure out who God is. The way that I describe step 3 is will and grace. It's a great TV show, but not the actual TV show. The way that I have this intense fascination with, I'm always trying to pull will and grace apart, right? And what I mean by that is if this side of my body is will, what I have to do, right? Like my actions, what it takes, my self-will, what it takes for me to get sober. And if this side of me, this side of my body is the mysterious part of grace, the mysterious part of how you help me, or love, or all the sort of the mystery that I don't control. Is it will that helps me see grace, or is it grace that helps me have the will? And I have this thing where I want to be able to pull them apart. I want to see somebody purely in recovery, serving their recovery and will, and I want to see somebody in their recovery being moved and channeled by grace. And in 34 years, I've never been able to do it. They stay locked together. Grace influences will, and will influences grace. And God, as I understand him, is the intersection of will and grace. God, as I understand him, is different when grace is having its way with me, when love is impacting me, when you have touched me in a way that has opened my eyes to something, when I'm in a meeting and I hear something I didn't expect to hear, and everything makes sense at that moment. I feel grace, and I see God very differently. But when I am in pain and I'm angry and I hate you and I hate everything, and I take my ass to a meeting, that's will, right? And God, as I understand him, looks very different. I see a strength in me I've never seen before. I see that I know what I'm doing for the first time in quite some time. So I understand my power outside of myself differently. The 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous, step 3 in the 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous describes will in a way that I think needs to get a little bit more press, because I hear people in AA talking about all the time how there's no use of will, that there's no use of self-will. And that is not what the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous says. In the 12 and 12 in step 3, it says it takes sustained and personal exertion of will. And that is an important message. I have to do the footwork. How am I demonstrating my decision? What am I doing to say, I don't want to live like this anymore? So you'll see when I'm talking, usually I kind of, I create like a timeline. And if this is me today, right? Behind me to my left is my past, and to my right is the future, right? Recovery through the eyes of grace, I am able to see behind me. I can see it for what it really is. And I have to tell the truth, and that takes will. But it's grace that influences me and helps me to see it. And so step 3 and 4 step 3 moves me with quite a level of desperation right into the hands of the 4th step, right into the inventory. And I'm hoping that you're starting to piece together another reason why people may relapse, right? When I get patients who come in and say, you don't know me. When I put my mind to something, I do it. I went through Harvard without a scholarship, paid for it myself. I have created an entire law firm. I have worked sometimes 24 hours in a day. I have made up my mind to be successful, and I am. And anything I really put my mind to, I can do it. And I am not going to drink again. I don't want to drink again. I drove my kids drunk. Do you know what that does to me? I'm not drinking anymore. That person scares me to death because that person does not understand the power of the anterior cingulate cortex and the occipital frontal, the OFC, the orbital frontal cortex. They don't understand the power of how when I want to drink, I forget all of that. See, if I went to my doctor and the doctor said to me, Jennifer, I'm sorry to say, but you have breast cancer. You have stage 4 breast cancer, as a matter of fact, and we have to do very, very intense treatment. If I said to that doctor, yeah, you see, you don't know me. When I put my mind to it, I can do anything. And I don't want to have breast cancer. My mom had breast cancer. I swore to myself when I was a little girl, I wouldn't. It's not a good time for me either. I've got a, so I don't want breast cancer. So we good? Right? My doctor would say, no, you have breast cancer. I'm glad for all those other things. They'll be helpful in chemo and in radiation and when we have to remove your breast, but they are not going to make breast cancer go away. And wanting my disease to stop, believing that I can make it go away, does not make this go away. It's unrelenting. And that is something that we have to help them see. And through the eyes of steps 1 and 2 and 3, they can see that they should have stopped using years before, that they maybe have decided to cut back to, and always some insanely trivial excuse shows up and they're back right where they were again. And so the work of step 3, again, is to forcefully look at the truth about your relationship so you can gather the information and say, I need help. I need help. And where we find that the most is in the work of step 4. And so step 3, how do I demonstrate my decision? The pen is to the paper and I start to do the inventory. And lawyers particularly understand the beauty of an inventory. This is the work that you have to do to prepare for a trial. This is the work that you have to be able to dive through just tons of documents to be able to find what's real, to be able to find threads. And when you can capture an attorney's understanding of that, step 4 becomes a very easy task. Not easy is a strong word, but it becomes one that they know, a resource that they know how to use. And an inventory made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. The work of an inventory is to move everything out of the way so I can experience the truth. So I want to jump back real quick to another idea to offer for patients who are atheists, agnostic, and to our Christian friends and our Buddhist friends and everyone that believes and has a connection to some religion. The work of recovery, the power greater than ourselves, the important part of every one of those things is truth. Truth becomes a power greater than ourselves that we must pursue. And so when an atheist says, I can't do this because I'm not a religious person, nor will I ever be, I think it's unfair to try to get them to become something that they're not. I think it is important for an atheist or an agnostic to, if they are going to be an atheist or agnostic, if that's who they are authentically, well, then they need to be it, like full on. And not because they hate Catholicism and not because they hate the Jewish religion, but because it's honestly an integral part of who they are. It's if they could be something else, they would, but this is who they are. And a power greater than themselves is the truth, right? So pursuing the truth on a regular basis becomes the work of recovery. And so the inventory is that pursuit. And as we start to look and dive into what's happened, how our resentments have blocked us from seeing the truth, how our fears have corroded us. And the big book says that it's an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through with fear, right? So how does fear shape me? How does it blind me? How does it block me from you? Because see, anything that I put in the space of truth, if the space between here and here is the truth, I have to make sure that I keep it clean, that it's all swept clear. There's no debris, right? I need to be able to fly right through the debris like they do in Star Wars, right? I need to be able to have not let the debris field just knock me off my course. And the debris field are stories, lies, resentments, fear, and sex. And so I need to know those things very richly, very cleanly. I need to get a look at it from every angle. And so an inventory isn't just about the bad things we've done. It's about what I've made up about myself that I didn't know that I made up. It's another example for me is when I was using, as I said, I had a 7th grade education. When I got sober, I'd never read a piece of literature. I couldn't multiply and divide. I was completely ignorant, and that is just a fact. The stories I made up were I was stupid. I was ignorant. I couldn't be taught. You were better than me. I needed to marry a rich old man with a bad heart. I did not have a career path except marrying a rich old man with a bad heart. And I needed to keep it quiet so people wouldn't know how stupid I was. Those were all stories. And the inventory helped me to see all of that, right? But what really helped me to see all that was the action of going to school, right? So it was the inventory where I first started to look at the truth about myself, right? And how I had believed all these things and they just weren't real. I remember writing in my inventory, my sister was an elite athlete, one of the best in the world. And I hated her guts. And I hated her talent. I was so envious of her. And my mother had to go with my sister all over the world to be with her on and off, because there was only 3 places in the nation where if you had this talent, if you were in this sport, where you could train. And so at age 12, my sister had to go to Colorado, had to go to different states, and my mother would leave. And so as I was writing my inventory, I was writing how much I hated my mom. I hate you for leaving me. You loved her more than me. And then as I continued to write and I saw things from the different eyes, I realized that there were times that my mother left my sister to be with me. She left her other daughter to be with her daughter. That perspective had never occurred to me, not until I was writing my 4-step. And then the next thing that occurred to me was my mother was 28 years old, 30 years old, maybe. I don't even know. She was a child with a wildly talented young girl. Who knows how to do that? And my sister was a baby living in the home of, quite often, one of her biggest competitors and their parents. You think that was pretty? Do you think they weren't going after my sister? Right? My sister was just a little girl. And she was in a highly competitive world and she had no protection. Now, did that change the fact that it hurt that my mother wasn't there? Does that change the facts? No, but I saw it through a different eyes. I found compassion. I saw what was real. And from that, I was able to start building on the rest of my formula. But now multiply again that by like 1,000 different levels of insight. When I got to step 5, which is admit to God, to yourself, and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. When I got to step 5, I remember reading to my sponsor about my father. My father left me when I was little and never paid child support. And I never really heard from him much. He saw my sister a lot, but not me. And so, of course, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. You loved her more than me. You never even sent me a birthday card. I don't know why I said that, because there was a lot of things I didn't get, but a birthday card showed up in my 4-step. And my sponsor said, when is his birthday? And I said, my birthday is August 25th. And she said, that's not what I asked you. I asked you when is his birthday. And I said, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything? And she said, well, I don't know. If you want to be treated like a daughter, maybe you should act like a daughter. Whoa, right? The perspective, what I got to see from her teaching me that was, does that change what it felt like? No. But do I want to be his daughter? Because if I do, there's a way to do that. And none of it has to do with what happened before. It has to do with how am I going to behave? So if I want to be his daughter, then start acting like a daughter. And just that one tiny little sentence, I was able to start an interaction with that man. And that man soon became the man that gave me my life. And that man soon became somebody that I thought was very funny and found me to be very, very precious. And when he died suddenly, I was at his funeral as his daughter in a way that I didn't have to sacrifice my other father or anything about who I was. And it started with that one tiny sentence. The movement of recovery pulls us through our life in a very different way. It teaches us what I've become, an angry, bitter, blind person. And then it teaches me what's real, that there is this thing called love that can heal anything. And then the voyage of truth into my story, back down my timeline, where I get to see my life through a very different eyes. And yes, it's hard. It's not pretty. But in it come little opportunities, little doorways that I can open, where maybe I can have a different way to look at this. And then a really important part of step 4 and 5 is consequences start to become my teachers. See, when we're actively using, or when we're under the influence of stories, consequences are the thing that we're running from the most. There's nothing good about a consequence. It just means I'm going to jail, or I'm going to get kicked out of my house, or I'm going to lose something. Consequences aren't good. But consequences are my only hope when it comes to learning and developing my character. Without them, I don't know. I don't know how I'm influencing you. I don't know how I'm harming you or how I'm helping you. I don't know what I'm missing. And so it's in this part of the formula that I start to be less afraid of consequences, because I can see that as bad as it is looking back there, as hard as it is, it doesn't kill me. And after I say out loud what I did, and nobody ran out of the room screaming, as a matter of fact, they looked at me in love and said, we have a formula for that. We have a couple of steps that will really help you with that. They're called steps 8 and 9. And when you get there, you'll be more afraid. We have this thing called love, and I love you. And so consequences start to have new meaning. You see, something wakes up in us at this time. A soul force that Gandhi describes that we all carry inside of us. And that soul force is now able to hold truth. That's its purpose in our lives, is to be able to hold on to the truth no matter how fierce the storm. See, right now, as we move into this part of the movement of recovery, it isn't about not drinking. In early recovery, we get sober because we are disciplined by our suffering. We see now for the first time what's been happening, and we don't want it to happen anymore. We see that we're losing things, and we don't want to lose more. I don't want to get arrested. I'm not going to drink anymore. I need help. I can't drink because I'm afraid. I remember standing at the nurse's station in treatment and saying to the nurse, I just walked out of that lecture, and I have the disease of alcoholism, and I'm going to die. And she said, what? And I said, because I'm not going to be able to not use again. Do you see, like, something's going to happen or nothing's going to happen, and I'm going to use, and I don't want to die. And she said, are you going to use right now? And I said, no, I'm not going to use now, but I know I'm going to use again. It's like when I got kicked into this room that I told you about, and the truth, it's like somebody handed me a book and said, here, read this. This is the truth about you and alcohol and drugs. And it was like 7,000 chapters. And I get to chapter 48 and I think, holy crap, it was bad then. I should have stopped, and I can feel the weight of the rest of the book. And I know I did not only did I not stop, I was continuing to get worse. What makes me think it's going to work now? I mean, look at the freaking book, right? There's 7,000 chapters of me saying, all right, I'll stop. No, I won't. Okay, I'm going to stop. No, okay, here, it'll be different this time. I'm going to use again. And she said, honey, you're finally getting it. Such a beautiful statement. She said, you can see it. You can want to stop using and it will have no effect on alcoholism. You can stop drinking and it will have no effect on alcoholism except to make it worse. What you need is a soul force. You need something other than your brain. And so now I can hold that book and I can look and see it isn't going to be the outside things that keeps me sober, but see in early sobriety, I'm disciplined by my suffering. But some point at some stage in our recovery, we have to be disciplined by love. So yes, it's important to be disciplined by the suffering, but there is a unrecognizable line that we cross in our recovery where we become disciplined by love. I don't drink and use because I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I don't drink today because I love my power greater than myself. I love God. And I know I don't get to hold that interaction when I'm under the influence of the disease of addiction. And so I do what you say to do now, not because I'm afraid, but because I'm inspired. So first we're disciplined by suffering, and then we're disciplined by love. And we can hold the storm no matter what. So if we stay disciplined by suffering, we will waver. But if we're disciplined by love, nothing can blind us. And that takes us into, my opinion, the most important steps, step 6 and 7. Real quick, I just want to check on time. I know it's 1 o'clock. I have until it's 1 o'clock my time. I have 1 more hour. Is that right?
Yes, Jennifer, you're on for another hour. We wrap up in 52 minutes.
All right, perfect. Is everybody doing okay? Need breaks? Are we good? Yeah? Okay.
We're good.
I'm going to get to some movie clips, which make me much more interesting. So step 6 and 7. Oh, I love these steps, right? When we first get sober, the work of step 6 and 7 is to try to not pass out in our bed after we've done our 5th step, right? Like, because our sponsor sends us home after we do the inventory and says, I want you to read this in the big book and think about like, have you told the truth? Is everything out there? And I want you to say this prayer. And then that's step 6 and 7. And then I'll meet with you next week and we'll be on step 8. So 6 and 7 are sort of hurried in early sobriety. But 6 and 7 are, in our sobriety, become the most sacred steps. Because what step 6 and 7, which is, so step 5, we admit to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We tell what's happened. In step 6, we are entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. And step 7 is we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. So in step 6, now that I've done my 5th step, I'm able to say, like, I don't want these barriers between you and me anymore. Like, I want to know the truth. Step 6 in the 12 and 12, I believe, or maybe it's 7, I can't remember which. It talks about how we are conditioned, and we are most of our defects of character are actually unconscious twists in our character, things that we don't even know that how they got there, but it is what it is, right? We have this strange, peculiar way of handling things and not being able to see the truth about it. And I believe that happened when I handed over these things from this table, right? And then I lived without those things. I changed. Lessons that I would have learned as a normal child, I didn't learn. Shortcuts I took me out of the normal path in which I would have picked up lessons. Whatever or however I got there, what I do know is that there are things about me that I don't understand, that have nothing to do with alcohol, but they block me from you. And I can't live like that. There are things about me that I don't understand that make me so, I get so angry, and then I lose perspective. There are things about me that have been shaped, parts of my character that have been shaped, that make me ignorant to different things that life may really be trying to teach me. And it's in step 6 and 7 that time sort of slows down and I get another shot at it, right? There's a quote there that says, painting like this is easy unless you know how to paint. One of the things that happens in step 6 and 7 that's really powerful is the impact of recovery starts to show up in step 6 and 7 for us. So when I got sober, now again, please, for those of you that aren't in the program or aren't in recovery, a lot of the things I've said about myself, that that I was uneducated, that I was a prostitute, that I stole a lot, that I lied, that's not the case for all alcoholics, right? That's my story, right? So you don't have to be all those things to be an alcoholic. That's just how it showed up in my world, right? Some people are like the patients I treat, right? They're neurosurgeons, they're federal judges, they're quite successful, very well educated. They didn't steal anything from anybody. So the disease showed up in other ways. For me, I lied a lot and I stole a lot, because remember, I didn't have a cocaine problem. I had a money problem. And when I had money, I didn't have a problem anymore. So that was a story, right? So I stole. And when I got sober and I lived in the sober living, they strongly suggested that I not steal. And they said, if you steal, you're out, right? So I was disciplined by that threat. I didn't want to get kicked out, so I didn't steal. And guess what happened? I didn't get arrested. I didn't steal. I got to live as a human that didn't steal for those motives, and that was good. But as I moved along the timeline, I became the woman that hadn't stolen for a while, and I got to make the decision to not steal through the eyes of this space, of this spiritual lesson, which was, at that moment, I decided I didn't want to steal because it was yours, not mine. I'd never felt that perspective before, nor would I have ever felt that perspective if I hadn't stopped stealing for the motives that I stopped stealing for, which was to not get arrested, to not get kicked out. So this woman got to experience even more powerful motives, more beautiful reasons to not steal. And then that woman moved forward. Couple carpet squares if I was standing there talking to you right now on the timeline. And that woman, through the eyes of those lessons, I stopped stealing because I didn't need it. Like, I didn't need it to complete me. I didn't need it because I had everything I needed. So you see, that's a very different reason, and a very beautiful reason. Same outcome. I don't get arrested. But I'm different. I'm a different person. And then you move on down the timeline longer, and I stopped stealing because it is, I could buy it if I want it, right? I have a career, I have a life, I have money, and I want you to enjoy it. And so you see, the reasons to not steal changed. My motives changed. But here's the important part. I still know how to steal. Like, I'm a really good stealer. I think about stealing all the time, right? When I go into a hotel, I am sure that they mean for me to take all of the linens. I don't know what it is about me with 34 years of recovery, but I still think I should have that pillow and that really nice set of sheets. Like, I think to strip the bed and take the sheets, that's stealing. Okay. And I'm really good at doing that if I want to. Like, I'll walk right by the reception desk and tell them thank you for the sheets. That's how so now I'm a very different person. I'm not somebody that doesn't steal because I don't know how. I'm somebody that doesn't steal and knows how to steal. So you see that quote, painting like this is easy unless you know how to paint. That's a modern artist that said, it looks really easy to do this, but I actually do know how to paint, and this is not easy. So not stealing is easy unless you know how to steal. And so every day I get to choose. And as Steinbeck says, as human beings, it is choice that makes us the most beautiful creatures on this planet, right? A bee doesn't have a choice, but we do. And I choose today. He calls it, he said, the human spirit is a glittering instrument. It is always attacked, I want to steal, and never destroyed. And that is who we are. And step 6 and 7 create a space that I can live comfortably with this idea of what I am capable of. Another thing that starts to happen in step 6 and 7 is I start to see that there is something in me that needs help even more, right? And I start to notice there's something missing in me. We often think it's something bad or awful, but the truth is that's what isn't God in me. That's what isn't you in me. The missing pieces in me are not something I need to be ashamed of. They're not something I need to cover up. They're actually what's beautiful about me. And it's how you get invited into my life. And it's where I go and look for God. And it's in step 6 and 7 with 14 years of recovery, with 24 years of recovery, where I have been on my knees, beating my bed and screaming at God, you have to help me. I cannot freaking do this. There's something in me. I need help. That beautiful desperation of step 6 and 7, the longer we're sober. Bill Wilson talked about it. I'm going to grab a book here real quick. Bill Wilson talked about it in Emotional Sobriety. It is so beautiful the way he puts it. He said, those adolescent urges that so many of us have for top approval, perfect security, perfect romances, urges quite appropriate to age 17 prove to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 or 57, when we have 30 years of sobriety. Since AA began, this is Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA. He said, since AA began, I have taken immense wallops in all these areas because of my failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually. My God, how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible, and how very painful to discover finally that all along we had the cart before the horse. Then comes the final agony of seeing how awfully wrong we have been, but still finding ourselves unable to get off the emotional roller coaster. Even then, as we hew away, peace and joy may still elude us. That's the place so many of us AA old timers have come to, and it's a hell of a spot, literally. How shall our unconscious, from which so many of our fears, compulsions, and phony aspirations still stream, be brought into line with what we actually believe, know, and want? How to convince our dumb, raging, hidden Mr. Hyde becomes our main task. And then he goes on to say, my basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression. And that's long-term sobriety. That's why so many of us relapse. Because we think this thing in us, this block that we're starting to push up against, is a failure, when really it's that next level of saying, I need help. And it's in step 6 and 7 that we're finally able to do that. We climb down into ourselves and we find these truths and we come up and say, I need help. So those days when I hit my bed and I begged and I pleaded, God didn't restore the problem. There wasn't an angel that came down from heaven and cleaned up everything. Do you know what happened? I went to a meeting, and I went into this church meeting this one time, and I had to go into the kiddie room. Some of you have been in these chairs. They're about that big. I don't know why. And I sat in those little kiddie chairs, and I cried. And I cried, and I cried. And I said, I'm about to lose it all, y'all. I'm about to lose everything because I can't. And all these old timer men, I don't know how it was, they just said, we'll take care of you. We got you. We love you. I've been there. So the problem didn't go away. But like a million little ants came running to my help. Love showed up. Your experience came to me. You said to me, I don't know, you don't know how to do this. Something inside of you does. And something opened up inside of me where I started to have access to the collective unconscious of humanity through step 6 and 7, of the suffering that people have experienced over lifetimes, and their lessons and their experience all came to me. Problems still existed. The warriors and the people around me were so numerous I couldn't count them. But I want to show this clip that describes what this is like. When we finally were sober, we're on down the road, we're practicing law again. We've got our lives back. And trauma shows up, or that absolute dependence shows up, and we're lost in the woods again. This is from a clip. This clip is from a movie called Bagger Vance. And at this stage in the movie, Matt Damon is sober for the purposes of this clip, and he's suffered enormous losses from his alcoholism and from his trauma from the war. And before that, he was the most beautiful amateur golfer that anyone had ever seen. When he played golf, it was like the angels came down from heaven and were running around on the golf course, right? And he lost it. He couldn't even hold a club again. So that's where the movie starts. And as we are at this clip, he is sober, he is living his life, and he is with his caddy who has brought all of this back to him. Will Smith is Bagger Vance. Will Smith can be seen as God, as a caddy, as a lawyer's assistance professional, whatever you want to see him as, but he's been there with him the whole time. And Matt Damon is able to play golf again, and he is in a tournament that he's winning against two of the greatest golfers of all time. This is you, this is me on the floor. In the Gita, you would say, at the floor of the chariot.
You gonna be wanting a different club there, Junior? I can't do this. Hey, why don't you just loose your grip off the sledge? You know, man's grip on this club is like a man. It's not what I'm talking about. No, you don't. What I'm talking about is a game. Game that can't be won. Only played. You don't understand? I don't need to understand.
Uh-oh, sorry.
And soul on this entire earth ain't got a burden to carry. He don't understand. You ain't alone in that. But you been carrying this one long enough. Time to go on. Lay it down. I don't know how. You got a choice. You can stop, or you can start. Stop. Walking. Where? Right back to where you always been. And then stand there. Still. Real still. And remember, it's too long ago. Oh no, so I was just a moment ago. Come on out the shadows, Junior. Time for you to choose. I can, yes you can. But you ain't alone. I'm right here with you. I've been here all along. I play the game. Your game. The one that only you was meant to play. The one that was given to you when you come into this world. You ready? Take your stance. Strike that ball, Junior. Don't hold nothing back. Give it everything. Now's the time. Let yourself remember. Remember your swing. That's right, Junior. Settle yourself. Let's go. Now is the time, Junior.
Hey, Bagger.
Yeah. You are one hell of a caddy. Yeah, I do the best with what I got to work with. Ain't done yet.
I could do a 3-hour talk on this clip. There's so many things that come up at this stage of our recovery. And remember, we talked in the beginning about how to be sort of carried back in time, to look at how you got sober, to see the people that were all around you, but then to be able to see it through the eyes of, at this stage of recovery, and the kindness and the experience of all of the angels that came into our life. But in early sobriety, what we're told often is, I understand, right? Like, I get it, I understand. But at this stage, the answer sometimes is, I don't understand. I don't need to understand. Because there ain't a soul on this entire earth ain't got a burden to carry they don't understand. You're not alone in that. But it's time for you to lay this down. It's time for you to come on out the shadows. See, it's here right around this time in our sobriety where we start to see that it is the shadows that have taken the most from us. Not alcohol, not cocaine. The shadows, the fear, the traumas. The way that we've seen life has stolen moments from us that we can't get back, but we can have access to the truth about them. And as Bill Wilson said, in God's economy, nothing is wasted. And then what he says to him is a demand in order to keep my sobriety. He says, strike that ball. Don't hold nothing back. Before that, he says, go back to who you've always been. Who am I? Before I gave all those things away or lost all those things, like, what, and now who am I? See, when I got sober, I didn't get my virginity reattached, right? Like, I didn't become what I was before I started prostituting myself. But I am the sweet girl I was before. I am the curious person I was before. And I've seen all of the things I've seen. I get to be all of it. I get to be the whole thing, all of me. But he says, like, play your game. And this is a big one for attorneys. It's a game that can't be won, only played. Right? Like we aren't out there to win. We're out there to make mistakes. We're out there to have successes. We're out there to have failures. We're out there to do just some boneheaded shit. I've done worse things sober than I've done when I was using. And I have to, in order to keep my connection, I have to admit them. And it's in step 6 and 7 that we have all of this. Now is the time. John, I saw that you had a reaction. We were texting. I was making sure my volume and everything worked, but I saw that you got grabbed. What was it about this clip that spoke to you?
It's what I forget living in a day-to-day world and having some sobriety, and the kindness of others that I can still tap into. People who loved me when I couldn't love myself. I didn't think I was lovable. And there were people all around, like that what you described at that meeting with the whole group of old timers, every one of them willing to, carry you across another threshold. And when I think about that and how that saved my life and changed it, I can't help but get tearful.
What I love about this clip is it shows the electric nature of sobriety, right? Like that at that moment, if he'd have reached down and touched that ball, and I'm not a golfer, but that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. It would have been a very different game if he would have cheated, right? And it's the same for us in our life. So the lessons of the fact that golf is used in this movie is speaking the lessons of finding our life's work and our purpose, is because there are some clear ways that golf offers some sort of bumpers, if you will, that create character. And it's easy to see how many times I reached down and I grabbed that ball and I thought it didn't matter because nobody saw it. I thought it didn't matter because maybe one person saw it, but who cares? I still won. Like, who cares? And that's what life was to me. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen. And later on in this, and I couldn't get this clip in here because I was trying to rework my talk this morning, but there's another part of the clip where he is tied and he reaches down and is moving some debris out of the way of the ball before he hits it, and he moves a piece of grass and the ball rolls. And he just sits there and looks at it and he says, I have to call a stroke on myself. And the little boy that you saw in there runs up to him and says, don't do it. Don't do it. Nobody saw it. Just me and you. And I won't tell a soul. And he says, but I will. I'll know. And so will you. And so he tells on himself. And then everybody starts to swarm around him and say, it didn't happen. The ball plays funny tricks. Like, you don't want to, are you sure? Sometimes it shudders. And he says, the ball was here and it rolled to here. And it's in this part of our opportunity when we get sober that we start to be able to say, like, I might lose the game, but I'm not going to lose the opportunity to say the ball was here, it rolled to here. That's all that matters, is the truth. And truth becomes something that is a commodity that I just won't give away. And 6 and 7, I think I've spent enough time on it, but I'm serious when I say I could do a gazillion hours on this step because I feel like it's such an important part of our sobriety. And one of the reasons why it's so important is because it brings us right up to a very soulful, important part of the recovery, which is steps 8 and 9. And it's important to know that the work of steps 8 and 9 is in the formula far on down the way. But all of our patients, when they come in, so step 8 is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 is made direct amends to such people, except when to do so would injure them or others. And all of our patients come in with so much shame, right? They're just so ashamed. But it isn't until, maybe a couple of days sober where all of a sudden they want to run to the phone bank and call home and say, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I can't, I'm sorry. Do you forgive me? Are we okay? That's not an amends. That's me trying to get you to help me with the storm that's coming of step one. Tell me I'm okay. Tell me that we're okay. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Because I swear if you leave me, I can't do this. And that's not true either. So that desperate phone call in early sobriety, that way of me going to you and saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, that's not step 8 and 9. I want to talk, I do a whole other talk on mercy from a really beautiful thing from Shakespeare. The quality of mercy is not strained, it droppeth like a gentle rain. It's just so beautiful. In step 8 and 9, mercy, we find mercy. It's born for us in this step. And it isn't about saying I'm sorry. It is about, so suspend as I start talking here, what I'm going to say, like we say, what I'm saying right now, you don't say to another human, but you know this. This is how you know you're working the step 8 and 9. I understand the darkness inside of me. What I'm saying to Dan when I come to him, let's say Dan was my partner, right? Like, or he was the head of the law firm, and he brought me up and he loved me and he cared for me and he believed in me. And I stole money from the firm and I slept with his wife. I mean, I just did all kind of crazy stuff, right? I hurt him desperately. And he came to me over and over again and said, can I help you? And I said, there's nothing wrong with me. And I destroyed his reputation. I did all those things, right? When I go to make amends to Dan, what I'm saying is, I know what I did. I can see how I broke the sacred space between you and I. And I can see that I can't change that. And I can see how I took advantage of every single thing that was good in you. And that was wrong. And what I'm really saying to Dan also is, and here's the most important part, I'll do it again. And I'll do much worse. See, at this stage, I know that now about me. Not because I'm a bad person, but because I understand what it means to go dark. I know how I can justify the most unjustifiable behavior. I know as a human being, I was looking at a picture the other day and it just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I'm sure I've seen it a number of times, but it was a picture of, it seemed to be 1 million people all standing like this and facing a man, and the picture was from behind of Hitler and all you could see was his head. One man, millions of men. And we all think we wouldn't be that person. We all think we wouldn't be the person that we're capable of being. But do you see, as humans, we're capable of some really, really unbelievable things. My job is to stay awake. My job is to have as many things around me so I can see the truth about who I am, and to not hate myself for having those qualities, but to ensure that I know that they're there. I took a class in my graduate school on ethics, and the whole class was about the ethical dilemmas that aren't right versus wrong, but actually right versus right. Because it's in the right versus right dilemmas that we give ourselves away the most. And so maybe I don't steal your money out of your purse, but there are a number of ways that I know that I'm capable of hurting the space between you and I. And so the real words I say to John is, I was not the partner that I wanted to be. I was not the person that you loved and cared for. I was not the best of who I want to be. My behavior was wrong. I hurt you. And I will do what I need to do to make it right. And so maybe Dan's response back to me is, no, there is nothing you can do. But that's not true. I may never be able to save what happened between he and I, but I can turn to Lynn and say, everything I said I was going to do for Dan, every way I said I was going to be a better human, I will be in relationship with you. I will be that woman, and I will do what it takes to make sure that barn door inside of me stays closed. My amends isn't just between me and Dan. It becomes the way I live. And so in early recovery, I don't have the capacity to know that. Later, as I've inventoried, as I've worked the formula, I can see all of those things. And so I have a deep understanding of darkness, and I know what it takes to hold the reins of that wild horse. I claim the truth of what occurred as long as it doesn't hurt Dan. It doesn't fix the tension, and it doesn't happen on my time zone. But something else happens as we go into amends. We start to be able to see. We have compassion for ourselves, for what we did, and for what it means to be human. We see ourselves in a whole different light. And we start to find a way to forgive ourselves. We have the resolve of regret. So I want to show you a clip that I think describes that from Shawshank Redemption. And it's the part where Morgan Freeman have been given 1 million Oscars for, the way that he describes this sort of look at himself in the past through the eyes of truth and knowing what he was capable of. It's quite beautiful. And I'm going to hope this one works because I just put it in. So let's make sure. You hear it okay?
Please sit down. Ellis Boyd Redding. If I'll say you've served 40 years of a life sentence, you feel you've been rehabilitated? Rehabilitated? Well, now let me see. You know, I don't have any idea what that means. Well, it means you're ready to rejoin society. I know what you think it means, sonny. To me, it's just a made-up word. A politician's word, so young fellas like yourself can wear a suit and a tie, have a job. What do you really want to know? Am I sorry for what I did? No, there's not a day goes by I don't feel regret. Not because I'm in here, because you think I should. I look back on the way I was then. A young, stupid kid who committed that terrible crime. I want to try to talk some sense to him. Tell him the way things are. But I can't. That kid's long gone. This old man is all that's left. I gotta live with that. Rehabilitated. It's just a bullshit word. So you go on and stamp your form, sonny, and stop wasting my time. Because to tell you the truth, I don't give a shit.
When I show this clip to patients, I do not encourage them to visit the judge and have that conversation. I do say that's not exactly how you should talk to your parole board, but and it's not how we come, but it's the understanding that he had. Like, that girl's long gone, the one before, and at this point in recovery, as I start to experience amends, I understand that if I had access to myself at age 13 and I said, please don't do this, Jennifer, please, I would have just looked at myself and like, unless you have some weed, I'm going to need you to stop talking. right? I couldn't hear. So what I can say is, please be careful. And I'll be here for you when you get here. Right? I will live with that. Although I can't stop you, I'll be the woman years from now that won't make excuses for it. And I'll be better. I'll do everything I can in my power to be better in honor of you, because you couldn't. And that's what we're saying. The other beautiful thing that happens in amends is some people listen to me, and I'm blown away by the power of love. I did something to my sister when I was using that's unforgivable. And what I did to her caused my entire family to not go to see her first child be born. Nobody went to her wedding, and it was a lie. And when I went to my sister and made amends, and all I was able to say, there was much more behind these words, but I said I was not the sister that I want to be. And I lied. And my sister looked at me and she cocked her head and she said, I love you. How did I miss that? How did I not know that somebody like that was on this planet, that somebody could love like that was my own sister? And it was through step 9 I was introduced to her for the first time. Another beautiful thing that happens as a result of step 9 is I go to you, and before I get to your house or to this place, everything in me wants you to forgive me. I beg for mercy. I pray for mercy. And something opens up, a door opens up inside of me. And that same prayer for you to forgive me teaches me to render the deeds of mercy. Something about the friction of those days, when I come to you to say my behavior was wrong, when I admit, something opens up and all of a sudden I'm capable of mercy. Something I never even knew was in me or anyone else deserved. And I forgive the unforgivable. And I love the unlovable. And I render the deeds of mercy. That's how I found my way there. And that is what steps 10, 11, and 12 do. I see the suffering person sitting before me, and I want to be there with them. I see how other people are coming to me and saying my behavior was wrong, and I see the beauty in that. And I return back to me, and I see that inside of me, in the shadows and in the winter, was always this warm, beautiful summer. And I come to the most important part of the formula of the 12 steps, love. And I'm able to live on the other side of love. If Dan walks away from me and says, while we had it, it was good, I loved you, but I can't love you anymore, I will still love him. When my father died, I loved him on this side of love. I've seen people who've lost their children in recovery, and they found their way through that severing, searing pain and stayed in love with their child. I've never seen anything like that. I start to seek, what is it that possibly could have showed up for me on July 6, 1987? If that is a God, I want to know who that God is. And that's when I start to spend the time being still and saying, who are you? How do you show up in my life? Love brings me back to you and to God and to myself. When you come to know the world, you also come to love. And I know the world today because I've lived in it. I've hurt in it. I've made mistakes. I've seen the darkness. I've seen the light. I've seen everything I think I can see up to this point, and I know I haven't seen shit yet. But it's simple. You love what you know deeply. And the steps have helped me to love myself because I know myself deeply. And I hold the excitement that I have of the steps for you when you don't know them, and I love you deeply. And I just freaking love. It's a superpower. And that's what we find as we work the steps. But as people are brought into our lives, as we work step 12, sometimes we can approach and sometimes we can't. But don't try to be another human talking to another human. Just be who you are. People respond to that. So in this work, as in lawyers' assistants work, as you are called to make those calls, knowing yourself richly, the darkness, the light, the good, the bad, the program, how you've messed up in it, all of it. That's your wealth. That's your beauty. There are many people more qualified to give this talk than me. But I know my true nature, and that's where I come from. That's where I speak from. That's why I get so freaking nervous when I talk, because it's such an unpredictable part of me. But it's all I have to offer. I listen as the messages come and the steps unfold. And that's the beauty of all of it. I think that's my last slide. It is. So I think that's all my time. I'm sorry we couldn't do question and answer because I can't see all of you, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then maybe